This is Success Stories, a program of the Sorrell College of Business at Troy University. I'm Alan Mendenhall, Associate Dean of the Sorrell College of Business and Executive Director of the Manuel H. Johnson Center for Political Economy. Success Stories is a program that highlights the lives and careers of people who have accomplished great things, and my guest today is my longtime friend and former colleague, Dean of the Faulkner University Thomas Goode Jones School of Law, Charles Campbell. Charles, thank you for joining me today.
Well, thank you for having me here.
A lot has changed in the 4 or 5 years since I left Faulkner, and the developments have been very positive.
Yes.
Number one, I think, is the Executive JD Schedule program that was instituted. Would you explain that program and how it works?
Yes, I'd be happy to. Thomas Goode Jones School of Law was begun in 1928 in Montgomery, and until the year 2000 it was essentially an evening part-time law school. And then when Faulkner University acquired it, they acquired it with the intention of getting ABA approval, and so they put that process into work and started a daytime schedule, a more traditional 3-year program. And pretty quickly after we got ABA approval, provisional approval in 2006, the daytime schedule took off and was draining all of the students out of the evening section. And so we eventually closed that down. But about 10 years later, we started thinking about reimagining our part-time schedule, but rather than having students be on campus multiple nights a week, which essentially means that we could only attract students within driving distance, with the advent of online and distance education, we decided to experiment and create what we call an executive schedule, where students only have to be on campus basically every other weekend on Friday night and Saturday. And in the 2-week periods between on-campus sessions, they are learning remotely via distance education with lectures and discussion posts and that sort of thing. And then they come back to campus and we cover some of what they have been covering online, as well as new material in the in-person classes. And that sort of rearranging the schedule has allowed us to attract students from well beyond the river region in central Alabama. We have students from Mobile and the Florida Panhandle. We have students coming from Huntsville and Florence in North Alabama. We have a lot of students coming from Georgia and elsewhere in Florida, as well as in Tennessee. And we even have a handful of students that fly in from as far away as Texas and Virginia. Wow. And it was sort of a return to our roots, because these students are not going full-time. They are students with jobs, careers, families and mortgages and responsibilities that they can't go to law school full-time. And this opens a path for them to legal education and to the legal profession. And we're very excited about the way it is turning out. We're very excited about the students it's attracting.
Well, and the enrollment numbers have skyrocketed since I've left.
Yes.
Not because I've left, but since I've left.
We have been very pleased with the effect on enrollment. The year before we started the executive schedule, we seated our first cohort in the executive schedule in 2020. And so the year before, 2019, we had 176 students. This year, this fall, we have 342. And so that has increased our enrollment about 94%. We haven't quite doubled it, but close to it. And so now we have, we've done all of this without reducing the enrollment in our full-time schedule. And so we have 188 full-time students this semester and 154 in the executive schedule. And so it has really helped our enrollment, and we are very excited about, we've had our first class graduate from the executive schedule, and they are out, some of those students are now out practicing law, and it's very rewarding to see that happen.
Well, I would imagine so. I apologize, I'm fighting a cold over here, but I also imagine that the people coming into law school with this life experience, people who are out in the workplace, their experience probably enriches the 1L class in profound ways.
Yes, it can, because we have students who, having been in professional settings, and oftentimes they come from what I will call law-adjacent careers. And so we have a lot of students who are paralegals, who are working at the county courthouse, that are working in law enforcement. And so they have seen lots of the things that they are studying play out in the real world. And one of the things, I teach civil procedure, and one of the things I regularly hear from students who had been paralegals, we're covering things that they've been doing for years, but never knew exactly what the reason was that this was how the system worked. And so now they're getting the rationale along with the real life experience of how that works out in the real world, which can oftentimes look, somewhat different than just reading it from a cold textbook. And they're able to bring those experiences into the classroom and share with their fellow students. And I think everyone benefits from that kind of experience and background.
Yeah, that's fascinating. What are the biggest challenges facing law schools today?
Well, the biggest challenges facing law school up until recently, there had been declining enrollment in law school. That appears to be turning around now somewhat. And there has been there's constant change in the law. Legislatures meet every year, and they don't feel like they've earned their money unless they change something. And so there's always development in the law that we have to keep up with and have to educate our students with. And the other thing that is a challenge for law schools at the moment is that the National Conference of Bar Examiners, which administers the uniform bar exam, which Alabama is a uniform bar exam state. The National Conference of Bar Examiners is sunsetting the uniform bar exam and is developing a new, what they call next-gen bar exam, which is set to begin use in 2026, although not all jurisdictions will use it in 2026. Many of those who are adopting it will start in 27 or in 28. But they're eventually no longer going to give the uniform bar exam. And so this means that every jurisdiction, all 50 states plus the territories of the United States where they have bar exams, those Supreme Courts have to make a decision on whether to move to the next gen bar exam or to begin preparing to develop their own bar exam. States are doing both. Currently, California, I believe, is still planning to develop its own exam. Many states have announced that they are going to go with the next generation or next gen bar exam. Alabama is studying the question, and the Supreme Court has directed the state bar to begin making plans for a replacement process, a replacement test, but they have not decided whether that's going to be next gen or something else. They know that after 2028, the uniform bar exam will go away. And so we're in the process of working with the state bar and following these developments around the country. And we're very appreciative to both the Alabama Supreme Court and to the state bar for the openness with which they are approaching this process. But it is one of the challenges, because we're going to have to come up at a minimum with some new things, and it is not clear at this point whether that's going to be the next gen bar exam or whether it's going to be completely redeveloped bar exam.
Well, Charles, you've had a diverse array of legal experiences before you joined the faculty of Faulkner in 2007. Mm-hmm. You were in private practice, you clerked for the 11th Circuit, you worked in the Alabama Attorney General's office, and you were Deputy Chief Counsel to U.S. Senator Jeff Sessions, who at the time was chairman and then ranking member of the U.S. Senate Judiciary Subcommittee on Administrative Oversight in the Courts. Senator Sessions has been a guest on this show. Which of those experiences do you think was the most memorable for you?
Well, it's a good question. I think both my experience in the Attorney General's office and working for Senator Sessions on Capitol Hill were both very memorable. I often tell my students, since I had seen private practice, exclusively civil practice, meaning, as I tell my civil procedure students, suing and being sued. And then worked in the AG's office, but there I was doing civil defense of the state when state agencies or state officials got sued. We would provide their defense. We defended the constitutionality of state statutes. That work in the AG's office was the most satisfying legal work I ever did in the practice of law. And the issues were fascinating. The public servants that I got to work with were extraordinary.
Were you under Bill Pryor as Attorney General?
Most of the time, yes. Bill Pryor was Attorney General for most of the time, and then Troy King for about a year, for my last year. But it was interesting work with great people trying to do their best for the state of Alabama, and I found it very rewarding. I also found it very rewarding in Washington, D.C., working behind the scenes in the legislative process for Senator Sessions, because the work he had as in his committee assignment. He was on the Judiciary Committee, and he chaired one of the subcommittees on what they called administrative oversight in the courts. And so that was doing, that committee handled all of the judicial confirmations, handled confirmations for the Department of Justice, as well as was the Committee of Jurisdiction for crime bills, a lot of immigration reform, other very important bills, as well as some of the judiciary acts to add judgeships and that sort of thing, and to make changes in law and procedure for the benefit of the federal court system as well as the federal system of justice. And it was just an invaluable experience. I've never seen a place as busy as Capitol Hill. It made me dizzy to think about the number of issues that were coming through Senator Sessions' office. It made me dizzy to think about just the issues that our committee was dealing with, and we were and assisting the senator on. But that was only one of several committee assignments, not to mention all of the constituent work that was going on in the office. And so it was 90-0 most of the time, and it was very interesting, very exciting.
I can only imagine. Senator Sessions is a great man who has done wonderful things for our state.
Yes, and our country, yes.
I'm curious, we can only speculate, what you think the role of artificial intelligence and technology will play in the legal sphere, how that will affect legal practice, the role of attorneys in courts, the way people brief cases. I mean, what kind of impact do you think this is going to have? And I say we can only speculate because we don't know definitively. It's all so new.
Yeah, I'm neither a prophet nor the son of a prophet, but a couple of things that I have observed, and you read all kinds of extraordinary claims about AI replacing lawyers, and I think what little I've seen, and I'm no expert by any stretch of the imagination, but it does appear that AI can do certain of the more repetitive tasks that lawyers and paralegals do.
Responding to emails, that kind of stuff.
Well, coming up, drafting a set of interrogatories, for example.
Yes.
Or requests for production of documents. It depends greatly on the type of case. The bigger the case, the more difficult the case, the more sophisticated the issue, the more specialized everything about that case is going to be. But there are lots of cases in law that are very similar from case to case, and AI can be used, I think, and used well in that to essentially automate certain tasks. The problem, I think, for the profession is you can automate even tasks in garden variety litigation up to a point, but you still must have a human being going over that work to make sure that AI has produced a document that is tailored for this type of case with these parties and these issues in it. And I think one of the things that you see with the headline problems of AI gone wrong is you see situations where lawyers have essentially said, oh, there's this great new thing named AI, it'll write my brief for me, and it does, and they turn it in without really checking it. And it turns out that AI has a tendency to what they call hallucinate. If it needs a case citation, depending on how it's set up, you can set it up not to do these things, but if you're not careful, it will hallucinate a case name and a case citation and a holding that is saying exactly what you want it to say. And so if you're just very quickly reviewing it, you think, oh, perfect, they found me a great case citation. But when you go to look for it, you can't find it because it doesn't exist. And woe to the lawyer who doesn't discover that before they turn it in, and then the judge finds out first. Because then you've made, anytime a lawyer signs and submits a document to the court, they are representing that they have conducted a reasonable investigation under the circumstances, and they have a good basis in fact and law for what they are filing. And if AI has hallucinated cases, that representation is simply false, and the lawyer is subject to sanctions and not a little embarrassment.
I seem to recall having seen a bar disciplinary matter involving that very situation, not in the state of Alabama, although it could have happened here, but the one I saw was from another state, and the AI had generated citations to a case that did not exist.
Yes, it is happening over and over again across the country. We are fortunate that Alabama, to my knowledge, has not had any yet. And so I think with AI, I think it is a potential disruptor, but I don't think we are ever going to be able to hand over the practice of law to machines, no matter how sophisticated, because the practice of law involves, it's a fascinating profession because it involves both lots of study and knowledge of complex legal doctrine, but it also has a very, very human element. You have people that you're dealing with, people and companies and lives and livelihoods and in domestic relations, families that are depending on lawyers. And the lawyer needs to be someone who can sympathize and, in appropriate cases, empathize with clients so that they can zealously advocate for their interests. And I don't know if a machine will ever be able to replicate that. Perhaps, but I don't think it'll do it in our lifetime. But again, I'm neither a prophet nor the son of a prophet, so I could be proven wrong within the next 10 years. But I think there is always going to have to be a role for lawyers in checking to make sure that anything that is produced by a computer is accurate and that it is reliable. So.
Well, and so much of legal practice for litigators, at least, involves the in-person courtroom presentations and interacting with judges and juries,
Right.
and reading social cues in ways that machines cannot. We're still human beings communicating the way human beings have always communicated. We have these vehicles that assist us, but it's still ultimately human beings making these decisions.
Yes, and one of the most difficult things, and one of the reasons we have the jury system, is there are two sides to every story, and oftentimes you have very different accounts of what happened, and the jury is called on to decide who they believe is telling the truth. And it may not be that the other person is lying, it may just be that they are mistaken. But it's one of the central things is humans are better at that usually than machines. And so that process, I don't think you'll ever be able to fully automate the practice of law or the administration of law. You will always need people involved in that system, questioning witnesses, cross-examining witnesses to get at the truth. And that's going to happen in courtrooms and in civil litigation, happens in depositions, at law offices, which, again, is really reliant on the skill and ability of lawyers who are putting together both the head knowledge as well as the heart knowledge and knowledge of people that is attempting to seek justice.
What's one thing you wish non-lawyers understood better about the legal profession?
Well, I wish oftentimes that non-lawyers fully appreciated that lawyers are playing a role. I mean, and I don't mean that like they're on a stage, but they have a particular place in the system. And so you oftentimes have the person who asks, how can you defend someone you know is guilty? And what's for a good criminal defense attorney, their role is to represent their client and defend his constitutional rights. And so they are there to hold the government's feet to the fire to make sure that they don't abuse a defendant, that they don't extort a confession or beat a confession out of them, that they adhere to the proper rules of evidence, and that all of the defendant's rights are respected. And then if it goes to trial, that the government shoulders and satisfies its burden of proving everything beyond a reasonable doubt. All of those things are there to protect the defendant, but they're also there to protect us. Because we will want, if we're ever in such a situation, we will want a lawyer making sure that all of those things happen for us as well. And so oftentimes a lawyer may have a client that you completely disagree with, and the lawyer may not agree with a client on everything, but they have a right to have their position voiced and advocated competently and zealously. And when they do that, when you have both sides fully airing all of the issues in a case in front of a jury or in front of a judge, it means that the system is more likely to get the information it needs to reach a just result. And so that's one of the things, is that lay people oftentimes don't perceive that when they see a lawyer interviewed on TV, that lawyer is one small part of the justice system. There are a lot of other lawyers playing their parts, and the theory of the system is that by using the adversary system, both sides will bring up all of the relevant evidence for the consideration of the judge or the jury, or at least they're more likely to than some other systems that have been tried.
Well, my last question in our final minute is, how do you measure student success?
Well, there are lots of metrics of success. Bar passage rates is a common one, incoming test scores and that kind of thing. I tend to think, however, that much more important than any of those sort of easy to measure numerical things, the much better indication is, are your students doing good work, having satisfying careers, and contributing to society? Because if one of our law students wants to go to a huge firm and make $1 million, that's great. But we need lawyers who work in small towns and in small firms and who do public service as prosecutors or public defenders. And if they are contributing to our system of justice and making sure that the innocent are free, that the guilty get appropriate but not undue punishment, that victims of accidents and torts and other things get recovery and compensation for those things, and those who cause them are held accountable. If they are representing clients and producing good results in individual lives, then that is a successful lawyer, and a lawyer who can look back on their career with pride that they may not have been president of the United States or governor of the state, but that there are a lot of individuals out there in the community today who owe their livelihood, or in some cases their lives, to that lawyer. And that's, as long as we have students doing that, I will feel like they are successful.
Well, that's well said, Charles. Thank you for coming on the show. It's been a real pleasure. This has been Success Stories. I'm Alan Mendenhall, signing off.
This has been Success Stories with Dr. Alan Mendenhall, a production of Troy University Television. Opinions expressed on this program are not necessarily those of Troy University, its administration, faculty, staff, or students.